On your new role as chair of this committee. I'm looking forward to working with you as well as with 6 new members of our committee. And Dr. Carson, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Before we get into some of the questions that I raised in my letter to you earlier this week, I just want to get an answer to I think a simple yes or no question. If you are confirmed to lead HUD, you'll be responsible for issuing billions of dollars in grants and loans to help develop housing and provide a lot of housing-related services. Now, housing development is an area in which President-elect Trump and his family have significant business interests. Can you assure me that not a single taxpayer dollar that you give out will financially benefit the President-elect or his family?
Well, Senator, I was worried that you wouldn't get back. Thank you for coming back.
I'm back.
I can assure you that the things that I do are driven by a sense of morals and values. And therefore, I will absolutely not play favorites for anyone.
Dr. Carson, let me stop right there. I'm actually trying to ask a more pointed question, and it's not about your good faith. That's not my concern. My concern is whether or not, among the billions of dollars that you will be responsible for handing out in grants and loans, can you just assure us that not $1 will go to benefit either the President-elect or his family?
It will not be my intention to do anything to benefit any American.
I understand that.
It's for all Americans, but everything that we do.
Do I take that to mean that you may manage programs that will significantly benefit the President-elect?
You can take it to mean that I will manage things in a way that benefits the American people. That is going to be the goal.
To the best you understand that.
If there happens to be an extraordinarily good program that's working for millions of people, and it turns out that someone that you're targeting is going to gain, $10 from it, am I going to say, no, the rest of you Americans can't have it? I think logic and common sense probably would be the best way.
Yeah, although we do have a problem here, and I appreciate your good faith in this, and I do, Dr. Carson. The problem is that you can't assure us that HUD money, not of $10 varieties, but of multi-million-dollar varieties, will not end up in the President-elect's pockets. And the reason you can't assure us of that is because the President-elect is hiding his family's business interests from you, from me, from the rest of America. And this just highlights the absurdity and the danger of the President-elect's refusal to put his assets in a true blind trust. He knows, the President-elect knows, what will benefit him and his family financially, but the public doesn't, which means he can divert taxpayer money into his own pockets without anyone knowing about it. The only way that the American people can know that the President is working in their best interests and not in his own is if he divests and puts his assets in a true blind trust. Transferring his holdings to his children does nothing, as the head of the Nonpartisan Ethics Committee said just last night. Since the President-elect refuses to address this voluntarily, we need to pass the Presidential Conflicts of Interest Act that I introduced with more than 20 of my colleagues, which would require him to do so. So, with the time I have left, I just want to follow up very quickly on a letter that I sent to you earlier this week and that we talked about in my office.
And I appreciated that.
Good. And I appreciated it too. As you know, more than 7 million children rely on HUD for housing. 7 million people. Many of them are children, veterans, people with disabilities. For many of these people, HUD is the difference between a stable home and life out on the streets. But one major problem that we talked about is lead exposure. And according to the most recent HUD study, 62,000 public housing units, nearly 6% of our total public housing stock, are in need of lead abatement. You're a highly accomplished doctor. We spoke at length about the implications of lead and lead poisoning on our children. Can I just ask you to commit today that you will make sure that HUD resources are dedicated to dramatically reducing the number of public housing units where lead is a problem?
Well, I can assure you that I will very much be working with you on that. 310,000 cases right now of children, each of which cost us enormous amounts of money. I don't think people even calculate that into that when we're talking about it. So yes, I will be very vigorous in that area.
I very much appreciate it. This is a particular problem for us in the Northeast. It is a particular problem in Boston where our housing stock is old.
Right.
And it is absolutely critical that we get the lead out of these housing units and that our children have a chance to grow up without being injured by our own negligence.
Engineering, medical, and scientific professions, but the demand for public intellectuals is largely manufactured by the public intellectuals themselves.
Yes.
Explain that. How do they manufacture demand for their own services?
Well, one thing is by making alarming predictions, offering solutions to our problems. And if they didn't do that, if Noam Chomsky had just kept on stating in linguistics, neither of us probably would have ever heard of Noam Chomsky. He would have been just as famous around the world among linguists, but nobody else would have heard of him.
What do you make of global warming?
I think it's a classic example of the need for crusades. Now, many people are shocked by these emails. I'm not at all shocked by them. I read the original UN study years ago, and I was just curious as to how they were going to deal with the question that the temperatures went up first, and then there was the increase in carbon dioxide.
Right.
Because you can't say that A causes B if B happened first. And so I read this, and I could see they were tiptoeing through the tulips in the way they phrased things and so forth. They couldn't confront that. And now we're finding out that they knew darn well they couldn't deal with all the evidence.
So it fits the pattern of a group of intellectuals, climate scientists who have a very narrow competency, suddenly proclaiming that there's a crisis, scaring the rest of us, thereby creating a demand for their services,
Yes.
not as climate scientists alone, but as a kind of high priestly caste that can tell us all how to live and save the entire
Yes.
planet, and in the meantime generate billions of dollars worth of government programs to fund their research initiatives. And so it's a racket.
Yes.
All right.
But again, you have to take account of the ability of human beings to rationalize. I'm sure there are scientists out there who believe some or much of what they're saying, and there are other scientists who believe the opposite. But the ones who are pushing global warming are doing their damnedest to make sure that those who believe the opposite don't get heard in the public.
So shouldn't there be some large-ish body of climate scientists who say the data really does suggest that we're headed into trouble here, but precisely because my saying so as a climate scientist will look like special pleading, we as a community of scientists should be even more careful about being completely transparent, pushing the data out to the public. They should overcome the hurdle that it looks like self-pleading. Why isn't that taking place?
There's no payoff to that.
All right.
Imagine yourself as an assistant professor in some department where your senior colleagues who are going to vote on your pay, among other things, have millions of dollars in grants handed out to promote global warming, and you say just what you just now said. And they'll say this guy is incorrigible.
But is it possible that she might actually be black? And the best way that I know how to describe this, and I want to be very careful here, because I don't want to say that it is equivalent to the transgender experience, but there is a useful language in trans and cis, which is just to say some of us are born cisgendered, some of us are born transgendered, but I wonder, can it be that one would be cis black and trans black? That there is actually a different category of blackness that is about the achievement of blackness despite one's parentage. Is that possible?
It's absolutely possible. I mean, why not? I mean, I think that one thing that she said that I found so fascinating was she said her identity is multi-layered and that her identity is very complicated and that she didn't expect for people to understand it easily. And I think what she's alluding to is this sort of perhaps, and again, we don't know that much about the story. You know, we need to hear more from her and more of her personal story. But there certainly is a chance that she identifies as a black woman, and that there could be authenticity to that.
Tana,